Good day, everyone. On behalf of the Bureau of Justice Assistance, let me welcome you to the Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance webinar on how agencies manage all the body-worn camera evidence they're accumulating. My name is Chip Coldren. I'm the Managing Director for Justice Programs at the CNA Institute for Public Research, the Director of Technical Assistance for the Bureau of Justice Assistance's Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance Program, and I will begin the introduction for today's webinar. Today's webinar focuses on the critical issue of managing the rapidly growing mass of body-worn camera footage and evidence. Today's webinar will cover the following topics: how body-worn camera footage is tagged and categorized, as I said, how agencies manage all this data, and issues regarding the release of camera footage to the public, among other things. The technical assistance team members and site representatives we will hear from today include Drs. Shelley Solomon and Craig Uchida from Justice and Security Strategies, one of our key partners in body-worn camera technical assistance, and representatives from 3 jurisdictions with great experience regarding the matters we will discuss today. Dr. Shelley Solomon is the CEO for Justice and Security Strategies. She's the project director for the BJA-funded Small Rural and Tribal Body-Worn Camera Policy Implementation Program. She's provided training and technical assistance on body-worn cameras since 2015, and assisted in the JSS evaluation of body-worn cameras in the Los Angeles Police Department. Dr. Craig Uchida is the president of JSS and led the evaluation of body-worn cameras in the Los Angeles Police Department. He has served as a subject matter expert on body-worn cameras since 2015. He is currently leading the effort to determine how body-worn camera footage is used within police agencies and the criminal justice system. Sergeant Armand Lemoyne is the officer in charge of the tactical technology section within the Innovative Management Division of the Los Angeles Police Department. He and his staff oversee the use of body-worn cameras throughout the department. In addition to body-worn camera oversight, Sergeant Lemoyne and his team were responsible for training 7,000 Los Angeles Police Department officers on body-worn camera use and functionality, as well as the deployment of those cameras throughout the department. Sergeant Lemoyne has 25 years of experience at the Los Angeles Police Department. Ms. Michelle Stern has enjoyed a career in law enforcement for the past 26 years. She's a retired police officer and currently works in a non-sworn management capacity with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department as their body-worn camera administrator. Michelle has been working with body cameras, managing digital evidence since 2017, and she founded the South Florida Regional Body-Worn Camera Group. Mr. Mian Saladin is currently Technical Project Coordinator with the Rochester Police Department. He joined the body-worn camera team in Rochester Police Department at the early stages of body-worn camera adoption in 2016. Since that time, he has managed the technical elements of that program, including collection, retention, and retrieval of body-worn camera footage. So one of the things I like about this webinar and these webinars is that we spend most of our time learning from the people doing the work. And so it's really nice for us to have these practitioners on board with us for this webinar. I'd like to thank all of these individuals for sharing their time and experience with us and for working with us on putting this webinar together. This is the first of 2 webinars we will present on this particular topic, and one in a series of webinars sponsored by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and coordinated by CNA for the Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance Program. We thank the Bureau of Justice Assistance for its investment in the Body-Worn Camera Grant Program, in the Body-Worn Camera Toolkit, and in a range of technical assistance resources and opportunities for agencies implementing body-worn cameras. The Bureau supports state, county, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies in many, many ways, and we are grateful that they do. Please permit me a few other comments, and then we'll proceed with the program. This webinar is recorded for the benefit of those who may view it later on our website. There will be opportunities for questions and participation during the webinar towards the end, so please make your thoughts and questions known. I can assure you that others will appreciate hearing what you have to say. If you don't get a chance to voice your comments or questions, please feel free to use the chat utility, and we'll do our best to respond to your input during the webinar. Following the webinar, you will receive a request to evaluate it. Please complete this evaluation, and please give us your honest thoughts and recommendations. And please also let us know what other topics you think we should cover in future webinars. And let me thank Emma Wall and Rachel Johnston at CNA for the work they do on the Body-worn Camera Technical Assistance Program to bring these webinars together and making sure that things go smoothly. Now I'd like to pass it along to Craig Uchida to get us going.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. I'm going to let Shelley take over from here, and then I'll talk about a project we're involved in, and I'll let Shelley give the overview.
Good day, everyone. Join us. We're hoping that this will be an interactive and informative webinar, maybe with a few laughs along the way, because these challenges are interesting as we've faced them over the years. So overview wise, we're going to talk a little bit and introduce digital evidence management using a flow chart, provide some key statistics from the agency in a matrix format. As I mentioned, go through a flow chart that we've kind of put up that seems to match most of the agencies. We'll have an opportunity for the panelists to do a little bit more introduction of themselves and how they got involved in the body-worn camera process, answer some questions that we've predetermined, and then open it up to involve you in the questions. So, and then our contact information will be at the end, obviously. So with that, I do want to let Craig jump right in there to talking about digital evidence management and what we've learned so far. Thank you.
Sure. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope we can help you and you can help us with this project we're doing. And the difficulties of doing this, I think, is what we're going to be emphasizing and talking a bit about. Over the last few years, I think you've all seen this huge influx and explosion of digital evidence, of digitized information. And one of these is body-worn camera footage that I think you're all getting and using, I hope, and maybe having difficulties in dealing with the magnitude of the information and data as well. And what we're trying to do is define very specific areas of how digital management works, how we use body-worn camera footage in particular, and what to do with it, and how to make sense of it, I think is what we're trying to understand. We know that having all this evidence could be and should be useful, but there are lots of challenges, and that's part of what we want to talk about today. So part of what we're doing, we started a project about 1.5 years ago, and this was primarily through the inspiration of John Markovic, who's our project manager for the overall body-worn camera training and technical assistance contract we have. And the questions he asked us back then were, what do we do with all this footage? And that's clearly what we're trying to talk about today. And we started to look at different agencies and how they're using footage and the difficulties and challenges they have. And we decided to focus on 7 jurisdictions, and I'll get into those in a minute. And as we looked at those, we found that we had to have some method of tracking the numbers and looking at each stage of how you use body-worn camera footage in particular within the department, but also the extension to the criminal justice system. How do you then, transfer videos to the prosecutor's office? How are those body-worn camera footage is used in court? Those are the kinds of things we started to uncover. We also started to uncover a number of issues and challenges that are faced by these 7 agencies, but also we think that you the audience are also facing these challenges. And I think it's really important to try to delve into those. And that's part of what we're going to try to do today. So this chart shows the different agencies we're working with right now. And I want to highlight Fort Lauderdale, LA, and Rochester in particular, as those are the 3 sites that are represented today in this webinar. We are working with the Broward County State Attorney's Office, the Glendale and Phoenix Police Departments in Arizona, and also the Harris County Sheriff's Office in Texas. With Fort Lauderdale and with Rochester, we have 2 medium-sized agencies, and both of them have officers that exceed 500. And in Fort Lauderdale, we've got 535 officers with body-worn cameras. And they've generated in 2019 about 271,000 videos. And that also means 5,000 gigabytes of data that are currently being stored. In LA, as you know, is a large department. Their department's got 10,000 cops and 7,000 have cameras. And that means that they are generating 4 million videos a year. And in 2019, those are the numbers we have there. And they've stored 1.3 petabytes of data and continue to add to that, obviously. Rochester, like Fort Lauderdale, has over 500 officers with body-worn cameras also. They've generated about 300,000 videos and about 400 terabytes of data. So this is the magnitude of information that they currently have. And then when you start digging deeper into those videos and storage and other kinds of things, you start to ask about, okay, how do we purge these if we need to? What do we maintain? How do we cope with this amount of information? So part of what we've put together is a flow chart that tries to help us understand where that footage goes and what's being done about it, both internally and externally. And you know, I don't want to go through the details of this flow chart, but it starts with the cameras being turned on, the data being uploaded, and then dealt with internally within the police department. So you could obviously have good uses of the footage for arrests, for internal investigations, perhaps for officer-involved shootings, for critical incidents. And at each of these phases, you have people, officers, civilians, either looking at the data, downloading it, trying to make some sense out of it, and analyzing it in their own way. And analyzing it in the sense that detectives want to know, okay, when the arrest was made by an officer, what is this telling me, both with the audio and with the video itself? And then how do I transfer those to the district attorney's office or the city attorney's office? And how does that then flow into the court system? So these are the different facets of the flow that we're trying to look at very closely. And each of our 7 sites is going through this and trying to make sense of it, while also trying to determine what are the challenges and how do we overcome them. And today you're going to hear from our 3 sites, and they will talk about the challenges they have and what they've done about them. And what I'd like each of the panelists to do first is just, again, introduce themselves. So Armand, if you would please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you became involved in the body-worn camera program.
Sure. Thank you, Craig, for having me. Armand Lemoyne, and so currently I'm the officer in charge of the body-worn and digital in-car video program for the Los Angeles Police Department. Just about 25 years on the job. I actually was introduced to the body-worn video program about a year into the program. So officially we kind of kicked off here around 2015 with our body-worn video program. and I joined in 2016. The first few years was focused on training. So I led the training effort to get all 7,000 or so. It was actually 7,000 plus officers trained up, 7,000 to wear the cameras, plus another, I don't know, maybe 1,000 detectives to utilize evidence.com for case sharing and things like that. And then in the last year, I've been the officer in charge of this program.
Thank you. Shelley, I think, is back on. So go ahead, Shell.
Hi. So I thought we'd give an introduction from Ian in Rochester. Can you tell us how you got involved in the body-worn camera program?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Me and Saladin from the Rochester Police Department. I joined in 2016, and at that point, the program actually started its initiation phase in mid to late 2015. We identified a vendor, a body-worn camera vendor, and with the assistance of DOJ, we got a grant to bring the body-worn camera program to our 500 plus officers. And so every patrol officer is outfitted with a camera. We're in charge of training them, making sure that all the features on the camera work, delivering the training, and any update training that may exist. In addition to that, we also expand the program to include our school resource officers, as well as our, we call them neighborhood officers, which are assigned to a specific neighborhood. So, you know, to do follow-up calls. So with that, you know, we have over 400, actually at this point, I just checked earlier this week, we have about 450 terabytes of data that we currently manage on site. So everything is hosted within our IT department, and we're looking at ways of expanding our current digital evidence management system, our DEMS, so it could be more effective and root out some of the efficiencies from it to be able to demonstrate how much video is actually being recorded by particular platoons within the department, within sections, and within the classifications and criteria of what each officer goes to a job for. So we're expanding that on a you know, with all of our 500 plus officers that have the camera today.
Thank you very much. And lastly, for the introductions, Ms. Michelle Stern, if you could tell us a little bit about how you got exposed, you got involved in the body-worn camera program.
Thank you, Shelley. I was with another agency in 2016, 2017, and the assistant chief at the time came to me and said, "We want you to develop this program. We know how organized you are." And I said, "I don't know anything about technology." They said, "You'll learn." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So I started the program with that agency, and then I started the regional group that we have here in Broward. And through that regional group, I met some members with Fort Lauderdale. I did some training with them. They did not have a program at the time, but they were grant recipients and they were developing a program. So they stole me from the other agency, and so happy to have joined forces with them. And I've been with them now since March of 2019. They kicked off their rollout in December of 2018. So I came in shortly after and was really able to tailor the program appropriate for the agency. So it's been a very exciting ride, and I now have two wonderful assistants that work with me that are like my left arm and my right arm. And it's the key to managing all this evidence is really to have the right staff members on your team to be able to pull it off, because it is a pretty big feat, not just the equipment. When we're starting programs, we always think about the equipment and the body cameras, but the managing of the digital evidence, the back end of it is what often gets overlooked and is the most time consuming part of this whole process, this undertaking.
Well, I have to say, as a data geek myself and everything, I view you all as heroes for jumping in and trying to do this. So thank you for doing your jobs and also for participating in this webinar. So we're going to now go to the first questions to kind of start to dig in and figure out some and share some of your knowledge. So the first question is, in your agency, who is usually responsible for developing the categories and the tagging process in your body-worn camera program? And if you can describe this in somewhat in detail in terms of the automation, the technology. And we'll start with you, Michelle, because I know that you're deeply involved in this.
Thank you. We set up a regex in our system so that the officers are only able to tag their case number as their ID number with that certain format. And that reduces the number of corrections that we have to go back and then do. And we have, it was funny, we were talking about categories last week and I thought we had about 20 like LA, but it turns out we have 100. We have a lot of retention categories now. A lot of them are the same retention, but we got very specific with them to make it a little easier with the officer. So like on a traffic stop, they'll have 3 different variations of a traffic stop to be able to choose from. And some of those will have different retentions. So we set up the category retentions to match the retention required by the state of Florida for records retention laws. And that's how we set up our categories. And, you know, it's just like policy, it's ever changing. So as changes are made in the laws or as changes come up in the agency or the needs of the agency, we will update and change those category retentions.
Excellent, thank you. Mia, would you like to add to that a little bit about how it's worked in Rochester?
Sure. Yeah, we have 11 primary classifications that we've grouped for officers to assign their files to. But we have an additional 50 secondary classifications that can also be assigned. But we try and group them as bigger groups as possible, so officers have a limited number of classifications to identify their files with.
It's a little bit different. So now we'll move on to the second question, and we'll go to Armand. With your 4 million videos, what are the biggest challenges with categorization and tagging?
So the most challenging is actually getting the officers to tag the videos. So that's kind of twofold because we have categories and those categories are pre-populated in a drop-down list. That's the easier part, and getting the officers to do that is generally very straightforward and easier. Those categories, by the way, usually kind of mirror the codes that they would put in their log for the day. Traffic stop, felony stop, that sort of thing. The other more difficult and more challenging aspect is getting officers to identify the videos. So aside from categories, which would also be called tagging would be adding an incident number. Now for us, the incident numbers are generated by our CAD system, our computer-aided dispatch, and it connects everything, arrest reports, the actual arrest and booking and things like that are all related to that incident number. But getting the officers to actually tag the video with that incident number has been extremely challenging over the last few years, primarily in the beginning because it wasn't explicitly mentioned in our special order that governed policy and procedure for body-worn video. And then there were some subsequent notices that came out and revisions that then mandated that. And so it's gotten better, but we're still working on that.
I know that this has come up a lot in our discussion groups from a research point of view, but Craig, if you could add some of your perspective.
Sure, yeah. It's interesting that Michelle, you've got over 100 different categories, and I like that just because within the video itself, within an incident or an event, while you can categorize it up front, like a traffic stop or a domestic disturbance or whatever label you place on it, within the footage itself and within the video itself, you may have 2 or 3 different things going on that is unknown, and you won't know it unless you look at it and look at the video. And so having the level of detail that you have with your categories, I think works in some ways much better than just having 20 categories that you would, tag, because those categories are broad. Given the level of specificity that you have, I think that works in a different way and is an advantage in a different way, so that others can see that, okay, there is this level of detail that would be more helpful to us. So that's one of the things that I see. And the other thing we've been looking at too is, can we get video analytics to help tag within the categories? And that's a huge challenge, because that technology is not yet available. But having the ability to identify specific markers of activity or audio would be helpful, I think, within those incidents and events.
Hey, Craig, if I could just jump in. I see
Sure.
there's a question from Doug. So from Doug, it's is it viable to utilize the CAD incident number integration feature offered by evidence.com, which is from our vendor Axon? If we're using that, are there caveats? So we are well aware of that feature, and we have tried to integrate it. I dare not go into all the obstacles and pitfalls and things we encounter here at such a large organization with interesting technology. It has been extremely challenging, and we've hit so many setbacks that we haven't been able to successfully integrate the two. Axon has been working diligently for years trying to get us to, kind of overcome that hurdle, but we haven't been able to quite manage it. We've had some changes to our CAD system, which didn't help. We've actually changed CAD systems. And so that has been a major setback for us. So we haven't been able to get there yet. We would love to do that. That would actually relieve officers of the responsibility of actually manually adding that incident number. But it's still a bit of a work in progress.
Thank you. So, Mian, I wanted to turn this to you now, because I know that this never happens. The video gets mistagged with police. I know that the data that gets put in is always correct. So, but in the event that it does happen, what is the process for making the corrections in your agency, and how much time and resources is involved? So.
Well, we have 100% everything, all our videos and files are tagged. That is the challenge. So when an officer goes on a job, after they finish recording, they're required by our policy to return to their car, their patrol car, and tag it. We have a tagging station in the car where it's connected to the MDT, to the in-car laptop, where they connect the body-worn camera to it, and they tag it with the event with three main elements: the address, the retention value, and the CR number, which is technically the incident number. So those three main criteria must be fulfilled for that video to be tagged. So when at the end of their shift, they return back to the office, and then they dock it there. If for some reason, and when they dock it there, it gets uploaded to our DEM system, and everything is good there. So if they do not get a chance to tag it within the car, if they run into issues of tagging it, they could leave it untagged, and then when it's uploaded to the system, they can go in, log into the system, and then tag it manually there as well with the three with the three fields I just mentioned. Like Sergeant mentioned, having that connection with CAD, we're also working on integrating our CAD system to update the camera. So when an officer gets dispatched to a call and they take it, and they turn on the camera, that video is automatically tagged with that information. Now, we're still in the early stages of that. So we have to fully get our new CAD system up and running. So that is something that Rochester is in trying to invest in and make it easy for our officers out there. So, and I guess a third way of the mistagging, obviously, we see errors, we're all human, so we always have some, fat finger and a mistagging information, but, their supervisors are on a weekly basis are geared towards reviewing, spot checking their officers within their platoon to make sure that they have the files tagged properly.
Thank you. I know, Michelle, you're involved a lot in this, in the time and resources it's taking you to do the corrections for the missed tags and how you're handling it in Fort Lauderdale. If you could share some of that.
Yeah, so corrections with us is something that we stay on top of daily. If an officer forgets to add their case number and category, we send them a first notification. It goes just directly to the officer. They usually have a week to 10 days to fix that. And once a week, I send out overdue correction notices. It goes to all the supervisors from the assistant chiefs down. So they don't like to be on that list repetitively. That's been very effective for us, getting people to stay on top of their corrections. They know now if they get an email from myself or my staff members, they better take care of it or they're going to end up on what we like to call the naughty list. So we're right now running about 35 out of our thousands and thousands of videos that are captured a day. We have about 35 outstanding that need case number and category. And much like Armand, we had a similar issue with the CAD integration, where in our county, because we're dispatched regionally, it didn't work. It just didn't work for us. So the Broward Sheriff's Office dispatches for a lot of agencies, us being one of them. And because of that, it just didn't work out. So we're having similar stumbling blocks that they were, and we ended up pulling back from that and just having the officers tag everything manually. Another issue we see is, that the typical, like the year changed or the month changed, which happens every month. So we go back in and we check their month to make sure that they have the month right. Once a month, we do like the first 10 days of the month, we go through every single case and make sure that it's correct. And then we'll catch things also when we're building cases to share with our state attorney's office. Sometimes we'll catch errors that way, or if we're fulfilling a public records request, and then we'll make the necessary corrections, or we'll email the officer to find out what needs to be corrected to get that squared away for them. We try to correct for them ourselves if we can, so that we don't have to have an email exchange and disrupt the officers. We like to take care of that for them if we can, but if we can't, then we'll send a notification out to them.
Thank you. I know working with you, I'm always impressed and amazed by your organization. So, and your ability to get through all of this. So great job on that. So if we move on to the next questions, this is my type of question. So this is, what are your top three ways footage is being used within your agency, and who's using it? And then, the hard question that we're going to come up on is, what percentage of the footage do you estimate is actually being used in your agency? So I'm going to start this off with Mia, and if you could share with us what are your top three ways?
Currently, we use a small percentage of our video for training purposes within the academy. So officers and sergeants of each section review some footage that may be a training enhancement or proper, police procedure to be used. So that's one. Obviously, the a major piece of it is for investigators to analyze a video to see what happened at the scene as it happened, whether it be an officer involved shooting or an SRR, a physical fight. So there's there's ways of the investigators to slow down the video within our DEMS system, and also can be exported out into like Adobe Premiere to slow it down even further by frame. And I think and lastly, the third way, we use it split between recruitment and also for the FOIL process, for when a citizen requests body worn camera footage for an incident that they're involved with. So we provide that video redacted if necessary, based on the FOIL requirements.
So Armand, could you share with us the same type of answer and also talk a little bit about some of the biggest benefits to LAPD of tagging the body worn camera footage?
Absolutely. So for our top 3 ways, I'd say, so number 1 would be the actual officers who wear the cameras. So part of our policy is the officers are required to review their footage prior to submitting any reports. So, and I would say probably roughly half of the recorded body worn footage results in a report of some kind. And that would also include arrests, but certainly would include, the suspect is gone from the location, but a vandalism occurred or something like that, and a report was taken. That is probably the number 1 usage of our footage. Number 2 would certainly be our detectives who file cases with either the district or city attorney, and use evidence.com to do that, would in fact review the video footage before packaging that up in a case and electronically sharing that with the DA or CA. And then lastly, and this number is steadily increasing. Well, I'm sorry. And let me back up to the detectives. So currently, and I know Shelley keeps hitting that 4 million video mark, we actually now have over 16 million videos. So you can imagine the challenges we incur. That's why our compliance for categorizing and tagging videos is less than 100%. Having said that, we end up with a lot of videos out there that we're trying to work with. Now with the detectives, on the other hand, so that number 2 way they're sharing that video footage, we have, and this was quick and dirty math, so bear with me, but it was approximately 75,000 cases shared with our partners, which would be CAs and DAs. So it's a very small number, 75,000 out of 16 million videos. Now, to be clear, again, this is dirty math. Those 75,000 cases generally have more than 1 video inside. So anywhere from 2 to 20 videos could be part of any given case. But still, that's a relatively small number compared to the overall amount of video we have. And then lastly, and this number is increasing steadily, is video review. And I will use that terminology as the broad umbrella because that video review would certainly include actual audits, compliance checks, and any other kind of divisional reviews and things like that. And it varies throughout our department. We have more and more kind of cluster groups that are emerging to conduct these reviews. And you might imagine, because we have 28 divisions right now that deploy body-worn video, each with approximately 250 officers with cameras, and each one being headed by 1 or 2 commanding officers. So dissemination of information and adherence to department policies and things like that can become a very serious challenge.
So to go back on this, just to get a sum, I think you gave us a sense of what percentage of body worn camera footage estimate being used. Michelle, would you like to add into that? What percent you think is being used in your department?
So internally, I would say probably 5 to 10% if I had to make a guess. And that would be, some of the areas that the other gentleman spoke about. Externally, probably more 20%, and some of that can overlap. A lot of things that we use internally to do a criminal investigation will also get shared to the state attorney's office, or we may have a public records request for it. So probably in total, I would venture to bet about 20% of the actual captured footage is being utilized. We do have a lot of our videos that are not evidence worthy, if you want to say, like there's not going to be a follow-up on the case or anything like that. We have a 90-day retention on those. So a lot of those are getting automatically purged from our system, which is why we have so fewer videos in our system at any given time than some of the other agencies. Is a lot of our stuff that the officers give a category where it's not really going to be needed in the future, that falls out of the system after 90 days.
And I know in contrast off the questions here, but in Armand, y'all in LAPD, you keep them off, correct?
Correct, in terms of retention? Yes, so officially, it's either 2 or 5 years, depending on the type of evidence. But yes, we have not deleted anything from our database or from our sample of videos, and it's steadily increasing. And we have it doesn't appear to be moving in the direction of deleting any video, not in the near future.
So Michelle, back to you. I'm going to make you queen for the day. How would you like to see the video body worn camera video footage used, if you could direct that?
I think a lot of the uses that we already have in place are phenomenal. And the officers were very good at our agency with the buy-in. Most of them, if they call me to ask me a question, they tell me how much they love their camera, how they don't want to work without it. So overall, they're using it properly as far as activating and deactivating when they need to. The one thing that I personally would like to see more of is using the markers when somebody's giving a statement and then marking it, because there's a function on the camera to be able to do that, marking where that statement's being given. I think that would be helpful for the end user, usually going to be maybe the state attorney's office or the assistant state attorney. And then also for the officers to utilize it for themselves to author their reports, just a review for themselves of everything that took place before they're actually authoring their report. I do see some of them doing that, but I would like to see more of that if I had a wish list. Those would be two of the items on the wish list, would be more markers and then utilizing the footage to author their reports.
Would any of the rest of you like to add to that? This is your chance.
Well, I'll jump in, and this is just purely wishful thinking. I would love to see the body worn video take the place of a written report. Obviously, there are a lot of issues with that and making that actually come to fruition. But I would love that, and officers in the field I know would love that as well. They spend the lion's share of their time back at the station writing reports, and when all of the evidence is actually contained on the video footage, more often than not. So if we could find a way to make that happen, that would be wonderful.
Okay, we'll go on to the next question. So this is really moving forward to the public records request and what's happening with the footage in that sense. And I know, Michelle, you've done a lot on this, so we're going to open it up to you in terms of, does your state have statutes on how body worn camera footage is released and what's the process? And are you anticipating any changes with these requirements given the current climate these past few years?
Our public records requests have steadily increased over the couple of years that I've been with Fort Lauderdale. A lot of it is just people finding out that they can get them, that we have them. It's not just accident injury lawyers and insurance companies looking for these things. It's general citizens that are looking for them. So all of our evidence in Florida, in our particular state, all the body worn camera evidence is governed by state statute on what we're allowed to release and what has to be redacted out of the video. So the review and redaction of all of these videos become very, very, very time consuming. Our process at our agency is anytime there's a public records request, we have a public records coordinator. She takes in the request. If there's any digital evidence request attached into that request, she then forwards it to me. I provide an estimate to the requester on how much it's going to cost to complete their request. And once they have paid for it, I do require payment up front. Once they've paid for it, then we process their request for them and we send them a digital download link to the evidence. So they get it, relatively quickly, usually within a few weeks, and then they're able to download it right onto their computer and save it at any manner that they'd like to do that. I don't know that we would see a lot of changes at our agency. Changes would really be statute dependent. And in 2017, some legislation came through in Florida that gave officers the ability to legally be permitted to review any body worn camera evidence before they give a statement. Other than that, I don't forecast any changes coming in our direction, but that was one big one a few years ago that we did have here in Florida.
Okay, gentlemen, did y'all want to add anything on the estimate of how many videos you're releasing from your department? So I know it's increasing, you mentioned that. So.
Yeah, here in Rochester, we've seen a huge uptick in requests. And you know, like Michelle mentioned, you know, we have a process in place where it comes through our communications department, through the website, through our communications department to us, to the body worn camera team, and we provide an estimate of how long it'll take to do any necessary redactions of, you know, according to our guidelines, pedigree information, HIPAA laws, minors, etc., and provide that back. You know, in our early stages, we did charge for, did a chargeback for that for when a request was delivered, but unfortunately, there was a judge that ruled against that, and we could not charge back for that. So I think, I don't know the status, but I think that's up in appeal. So where I don't know, you know, if that would be reversed or not, but with the amount of requests that we're getting today, and we don't see any slowdown. So just last week, we got 12 requests in one day. And compilation of how many hours, just to give it a, you know, an idea to you all, how much that involved, that was about those 12 requests consisted of about 40 officers and about 220 hours of video. Because, you know, because of the incident that occurred that was requested. So here in Rochester or in our county, we need to, you know, relook at how we deliver these FOIL requests for public consumption and public information that's requested from our citizens.
And
With our,
go ahead, Armand.
with our department, so I can't tell you exactly how many in 2020, but we only recently started releasing video as early as, or as late as 2018. So since then, though, we've released approximately 1,500 videos and an additional just over 100 what they would consider critical incident videos, which could be a number of different things, but certainly would involve officer-involved shootings, major events of any kind that would be considered critical and require additional resources of that nature, things like that. So, and like everyone else, those requests are coming in far more frequently, since now it's easier to obtain that footage. And then for those last two questions about, you know, the challenges and so forth, well, thankfully our section doesn't handle release of video because we just couldn't handle it. There's only 6 of us. So it would be overwhelming challenge for us. But with releasing that video, I know the big part, and Michelle mentioned this, is the redaction, right? And depending on the type of video and the type of incident in the video and where it takes place and who's involved, it could be a tremendous lift, right? You've got some officer faces that may or may not remain in there. You've got license plates, you've got the inside of someone's home, you've got the address, all these different things that need to be removed or deleted or blurred out. And it's very time consuming, especially if you have a long video. So I know, and these are resources that, you know, have to be provided by the agency, you know, and there's usually no financial support that comes in to supplement those efforts. So it makes it very challenging to do it with the staff that we already have who were not doing that before.
Well, that is as our standard questions. We're going to turn it over to John Markovich. Before we do that, I wanted to say thank you to each of you for sharing the depth of your knowledge and participating in this. And you get gold stars for getting the answers together. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Shelley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I purposely did not insert myself at the beginning of this video because we wanted to talk about the nitty-gritty challenges of dealing with the tsunami of digital media evidence. But my name is John Markovic, and I run the body-worn camera program at the Bureau of Justice Assistance. The 3 presenters today, thank you for presenting. I'd like to let you know that they're all grantees of ours. LAPD was in our inaugural grant year in 2015, and they applied for a competitive award, and they were awarded $1 million for approximately 800 cameras, which was just part of the 7,000 that Armand mentioned that they have. And then again, they applied in 2019 to get additional cameras, 355 additional cameras to expand to their transit unit. Also in our inaugural year, Rochester requested and put in an application, a competitive application for 504 cameras, which is essentially their full complement of cameras. And Fort Lauderdale did the same in 2016, and they got basically their 535 cameras are supported through the BWC grant. So those of you who are on the call, who some of you I know are grantees, some of the people listening, if you're interested, Emma did put a link for the BJA funding site. We anticipate the 2021 award solicitation will go out soon. Just as a brief recap, we've given away about $20 million each year since 2015. This past year for 2020, we split that. We provided $10,000 to our direct funded body-worn camera grant, so what the same program that Rochester, LA, and Fort Lauderdale applied for. That'll be open this year. But one of the challenges is that many agencies, smaller and rural agencies and tribal agencies, don't have the bandwidth that LA, Rochester, and Fort Lauderdale do for grant applications. So we will be fielding what's called a micro grant application dedicated to smaller agencies. So stay tuned for that. We're working with Craig and Shelley on that. JSS is going to be handling that, and it'll be a very similar in focus as our general body-worn camera program, but it'll be more streamlined to sort of meet the smaller rural and tribal agencies where they're at. So we're excited about that. That's sort of a new turn for BJA, meeting the needs of the field. So with that, I'm going to try to navigate my way here on the Q&A. We did have one question, I think that might have been answered, but maybe if I can read. So I think what sort of, I'm going to improvise on a little bit, is what type of response are you providing to victims who are not involved in criminal cases, but in civil cases? I suppose something like a traffic accident. And what volume is that of some of your requests? Michelle, maybe, I think you alluded to something similar in your discussion.
Yeah, so the majority of our public records requests are going to be these types of requests, either from victims or people seeking civil. We have a lot of civil attorneys that contact us. So we have a high percentage of the ones that we process. I released about just a little over 500 last year requests. Now that's not 500 videos, because as Armand stated, many of these cases have multiple videos. So we have hours and hours and hours. One case I had the end of last year, beginning of this year, had 3,800 plus files on it. It took me 5 hours just to do the estimate for the gentleman, let alone start producing. So I spend about 30 hours to 60 hours a week just processing public records requests.
Great. And there was another question that came in, is basically how many folks are you all employing, or how many, I guess, full-time equivalent positions do you use for digital evidence management in each of your departments? Armand, why don't we start with you?
Sort of a complicated question.
Yeah.
So the easy part to answer is, well, for the direct technical support and maintenance and upgrades and all those things, it's our section, which consists of 6 people, including myself. We do have an on-site representative from our vendor, but then when it comes to audits, video reviews, compliance checks, case management for the detectives, and all those sorts of things. It's really scattered throughout our department. We do have our media relations division, and not everyone in there works on video distribution, but maybe 5 to 10 people in there. There's a handful of people that work our force investigation division that handles our categorical use of force incidents. Those are usually considered life-threatening use of force incidents that work with media relations to produce those videos and things like that. But everyone, not everyone, most of the sworn employees on this department in some way deal with body-worn video. Whether it be, and we can't forget internal affairs for complaint investigations. Obviously, not all of those involve body-worn video, but many do. And so those investigators find themselves reviewing video as well. So there are a lot of people who put their hands on it, but who are not necessarily directly involved with supporting the system or maintenance of it or something like that.
Right. Mian, do you want to take a quick stab at that? How many staff you have to manage DEM?
Sure. Currently, it's a complicated answer, but we have 4, 2 sworn and 2 non-sworn. So for the 2 sworn, they are technically only using less than, like my lieutenant, he uses less than, I would say, 10% or 20% of his time towards the body-worn camera program, because he's in charge of the major crimes unit. And my sergeant, he lately, in the past 6 months, I would say he spends about maybe 50% of his time now with the body-worn camera program. As for myself, I'm 100% in the body-worn program, as well as maintaining and keeping up to date with our all of our blue light cameras, which is our CCTVs across the city. We have over, I want to say 100, the number's always moving. So it's about 160, 170 cameras we have throughout the city. So I maintain that as well as interview rooms that we interview suspects and witnesses for. And then the 4th person is our digital media expert. So he's in charge of doing the redactions, creating timelines on video for investigative and for court for when that case goes to court. Great.
So I think we've come up on our hour. We'll probably go a few minutes over if those who want to stay on. Great. There was one question that came in about will there be additional funding this year? So we will be announcing the funding, as I alluded to, in a couple weeks. Our funds are allocated by Congress, and actually this year they allocated an extra $5 million. So essentially, don't hold me to this, but we're looking to, similar to last year, we'll have the direct funding competition for any agency, but really mostly for larger agencies. And that'll probably be about $15 million. And then we will be running a micro grant program in the spring from 2020 funding allocations, but we expect to repeat that program again next year. So we'll have the small and rural tribal grant. And so for this year, that'll be about $10 million, or that's the total award. It takes some to run the program for funding. So maybe about a good portion of that will be funded to awardees competitively applying, and the same will occur in 2021. With that, please go to the funding site that Emma put down, that Emma included in the chat. If you've subscribed to the BWC TTA newsletter, we announced the funding opportunities there, so you'll get that in an email. I would promote the fact that we're having a second video on this probably sometime in April on how the prosecutors are dealing with the digital evidence media and how they're working with law enforcement agencies. And then one other thing I was going to say is, just stay tuned for that. I thank everybody from CNA and JSS and our panelists for presenting today. One last thing. So if you have general questions, please direct that to the BWC TTA. Don't direct those to Shelley or Craig. They don't have the bandwidth to deal with those. But if you do have questions or if you have information to share with us specific to digital evidence media and how you're managing that, you can direct that to Shelley and or Craig. So with that, thank you. Stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you on part 2 of this webinar.
One of the will come through, and I don't know if the person that asked is still on, but they were asking if we used separate software for redaction. For Lauderdale, we do not. We had explored that, but as Axon improved their redaction studio, we found that the capabilities that they had with that program worked just fine for us. And then we don't have to download something, redact it, and then re-upload it. It's a one-stop shop. We do the redaction, the file's right in there, and then we can send the download link to the requester straight from there. So that's how we manage our redaction.
And for Rochester, our redaction software within our DEMS system is not that great. So we export it out, we load it into Adobe Premiere, and our digital media specialist, he redacts it, audio and video as needed with blurs, blur boxes, and uploads it back to our system, and then it's available to be released at that point.
Great. So I'm seeing a question here. This may be a tough one, but what positions have police unions taken regarding the release of body-worn camera footage? Have they been engaged in these conversations about what is being released?
So for us, yes, our league, it's our police league that's our union, was with most of the officers, with almost all of the officers, and we were opposed to releasing body-worn video. Mainly, there were a lot of concerns about it and how it was going to be used, how people were going to chop up the video and take it out of context and all sorts of things like that. So obviously there was a tremendous amount of pushback from the police as a whole and our police union who supported that effort. That effort was obviously lost, but not completely. So while our department did move to release video, it was released in such a way that actually kept the context, right? So it wasn't just, hey, here's the video, do whatever you like with it. It's available to anyone who wants it. Instead, it's, well, we're actually going to provide the video to you with narrative and with context. And so if you've seen some of those LAPD YouTube videos, you have the commanding officer who's actually narrating what you see, how it began, how it progressed, and how it ended, with all of the facts supporting that incident. Because most of the time on TV, and we all know, you see the last 30 seconds or a 30-second clip where some officer hits someone in the head with a baton and they go, oh, here we go again. But it's taken completely out of context more often than not. So that has worked to our advantage a lot of times. And I think that's why our request for videos is lower than I certainly expected it to be. I expected millions of requests. But since we're releasing the critical incidents and explaining them, I think that takes a lot of the angst and frustration that people feel in trying to understand an incident they don't understand.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I will. At Fort Lauderdale, when they were initially starting the program, they were very hands-on with the union. And when they were developing policy, everybody came to the table, administration and the union together, and some of the people that were advising from the body camera area on what needed to be in policy. We've done policy revisions. Anytime we do a policy revision or we do an equipment upgrade, we always let our union have a voice. But in Florida, we don't have a choice what gets released and what doesn't get released. We have sunshine laws that are very open. It's one of the most open states. I think Rochester is probably in the same situation we are, where if somebody requests something, there's not a lot of reasons for us to say no, other than it's an open active criminal investigation. And if an arrest has been made, it's no longer open and active, even though the state hasn't finished their prosecution side of it. For us, as far as we're concerned, it's closed. So they can get almost everything. And there are some statutory exemptions. And of course, we follow all of those, and that's what we have to redact out. But they're going to get it just because of the freedom of information laws and the way that they work in our state.
So that's the question about unions is interesting. Something just came across my news feed this morning. In Maryland, the legislatures are pushing for having a 2-minute pre-record as opposed to the current standard 30-minute or 32nd, 2-minute pre-record as opposed to the 30-second pre-record that is standard, based on the argument. There was an incident where there was a shooting involving a security guard recently, and I think they surmised, had they captured things earlier on the video, that would have provided more context. We can imagine what that would do to the amount of video, volumes of video you're already collecting, but it was sort of an interesting development. And just to tie it back to the union, a legislator spoke about why they would want 2 minutes, and the union representative basically responded saying that 30 seconds was long enough and it's been sufficient. So may want to Google that, but sort of interesting development. We'll see where that goes. Maybe we'll do one more question here. Let me.
Hey, John, there's one I just want to jump on real quick if I can.
Sure.
It's from Doug. So Doug asked about sharing with district attorneys, and I'm trying to understand all of it, but I will provide this answer and you tell me if that actually answers what you're asking. So for our department using evidence.com, we have our own instance of evidence.com that is strictly for LAPD. Detectives will go in there, create their case, which is just an electronic folder, dump in all the relevant evidence, and then electronically share that case with the city or district attorney. Now, our city attorney's office has their own instance of evidence.com, as does the district attorney. So all of those instances are separate from each other, which means the city or district attorney cannot come into LAPD's instance and look around at our videos. We must share electronically with them. Once they get it, they have their own copy. Now they can do what they want with it. That's the way it works with us. We can additionally add partners. So our city attorney and district attorney are considered partners at evidence.com. We can add other agencies as long as they have evidence.com. So if, say, I don't know, Rancho Cucamonga PD or whatever has evidence.com, they can send a request to our agency asking to be in a partner. Then we would either accept or deny that request. If we accept it, both sides have to accept, and then we can actually share just like we would with the CAs or DAs. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, Doug, but that's how we do it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's presaging our next webinar, where we'll dive into what the challenges are with prosecutors. I think some are lucky to be able to sign on to evidence.com or other similar systems, but others are still requesting CDs. And the other thing we know is that in some jurisdictions, and it seems to be particularly prevalent in the Commonwealth of Virginia, when there is an evidentiary value to body-worn cameras, the prevalence here seems to be that the prosecutors want to watch everything because only he or she can really determine what's evidence and what's not. And I think in other jurisdictions, including what we're hearing from LA City Attorney's Office, from some research has been done, that they're looking at what they can, but they have such a large volume that they can't simply afford to watch every bit of video on every case when they're deciding whether or not to prosecute, or and even whether or not to prosecute, or even in cases where they're going up, taking the case to court. So they're relying more heavily than, let's say, what it appears is happening in Virginia, on officers telling them what's relevant on the video, or hopefully bookmarking the video to say, this 5 officers were on this scene. Here's the segments of each video that you should watch where there's something of evidentiary value on there. So I think we'll dive into that a little bit in the next webinar, which is scheduled for sometime in April. Hopefully you subscribed to the BWC TTA newsletter. You can go to the site and do that. So stay tuned. And unless there's another burning question that somebody wants to answer, I think
There's one more from Michael.
Okay.
So Michael asks about what's the budget for LAPD for video storage of body-worn footage only?
Great question.
Well, so the short answer is I can't tell you what the budget, what it costs for storage only because we have an entire package that comes with everything. So I couldn't tell you what the piece is for storage because it's all included. But our first 5-year contract, which just ended recently, was about 50 million. And this new one's about 80. There's some new features and some new things in there, but that's all inclusive. And so our last 5-year contract did include 3 body-worn cameras, meaning we got the first Axon Body camera when it came out. When the Axon Body 2 came out, they came and swapped that out for us. And then the Axon Body 3, which we just did last year, swapped out the 2. So that was all included in that package. And our next package is similar to that.
No, that's actually, I'm glad that question came up. I'm glad that you interrupted me and posed that question. So video storage is really the big part of the cost, including the processing and the redaction. But unfortunately, historically, we've had an issue with that with the body-worn camera grant program that really, it's complicated, but it ties to the fact that this is a program for innovation, not for continuation. So the legislative language by which we were bound is that the funding couldn't pay for storage except when that storage is sort of bundled as an all-in-one package, what we were calling, maybe not exactly appropriately, but software as a service. So if you're paying X amount per month per cameras, that covers storage and retrieval and maybe some redaction services, that was okay. But if you're getting a separate charge for storage, that was interpreted by the legislature as sort of continuation funding. And we're really here to implement new body-worn camera programs, not to help agencies sustain them. Once they started, the idea was they're supposed to sustain. But I think finally, it's not easy to do, but the message got through to the legislative committees that write this accompanying language that the storage costs are a big part of the driver, and basically the cost structure, the way they're monetizing it, a lot of the vendors is with storage. So for 2021, there are no longer restrictions. Body-worn camera footage can be covered. There's a requirement for all of our grants. They're predicated on the fact that you're buying cameras, and we generally have a $2,000 per camera metric, knowing that that's not the cost of a camera. It's a match grant program. So if you were to get 100 cameras, let's say, you would put in a proposal to get 100 cameras, you'd be capped at $200,000. You'd have to match with $200,000 in cash or in kind. So that could be the salaries for your DEM management personnel. And now it can also be storage. So, basically if you get 100 cameras, we'll work with you by providing you up to $200,000, and then you'll have to show some sort of match on that. But we're pretty open on how you match with that. So again, stay tuned for the upcoming funding award. We're looking to address a few issues, some of the nuances about how we're going to format the program this year, but it should be coming out in the next couple weeks, certainly in March. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again, everybody, for staying tuned. And we had 51 participants stay with us. So thanks all, and come stay tuned for the next one in April. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.